May 20th, 1941. 22,000 German paratroopers drop over Crete in the largest airborne operation the world had seen. The first wave lands directly on New Zealand and Australian defensive positions that German intelligence had assessed as lightly held. They were not lightly held. The paratroopers who landed carried one pistol and one knife. Their rifles were in containers somewhere below them. 6,000 Germans were killed or wounded in 48 hours. Hitler declared that the era of airborne surprise was over after Crete. No large-scale German airborne assault was ever launched again. Here is exactly what the men who survived were carrying, and what Crete proved about why it mattered. The Walther P-38 weighed 0.96 kilograms. It fired the 9mm Parabellum cartridge from an 8-round magazine. Its trigger mechanism was double action. The first pull both cocked and fired the weapon without a preparatory action from the shooter. If you have watched the Panzer Crew script on this channel, you have seen this pistol before. It was the standard sidearm for SS Panzer crews, specifically because it functioned with one hand, fired by a man exiting a burning vehicle through a 50-centimeter hatch in the first second after clearing the hull. For a Fallschirmjäger on Crete, the logic was identical, and the situation was worse. A paratrooper landing under direct fire on a position that was not supposed to be there had the same operational problem as a tank crew going through a hatch. One hand possibly occupied. Immediate contact. No time for a preparatory action. The P-38 was not chosen for a conventional gunfight. It was chosen for the seconds before the containers could be reached, if they could be reached at all. At Crete, many of them couldn't. The Waffen-Behalter, the cylindrical equipment containers, held the weapons the Fallschirmjäger had trained to fight with. MG-34 machine guns, Kar 98K rifles, mortars. Ammunition came in standardized loads, color-coded by contents. They were dropped separately from the men, descending on their own parachutes to land, in theory, close enough to be reached in the first minutes after landing. At Crete, they landed in defensive positions the Germans did not control. Allied troops captured containers before the paratroopers who needed them could reach them. Men fought the first hours of the largest airborne operation in history with a pistol and a knife, against prepared defensive positions with interlocking fields of fire, because the weapons they were supposed to use were on the wrong side of the line. What the first hours of Crete looked like on the ground was documented in after-action reports from both sides. German paratroopers who landed at Maleme, at Heraklion, at Rethymno, found themselves in defensive zones that German intelligence had not mapped correctly. Men who landed in the open were killed before they reached their feet. Men who landed in cover, in ditches, in olive groves, or in the lee of stone walls, used the P-38 and the gravity knife, and whatever cover the terrain provided, while they waited for a gap in the fire that would let them reach a container. Some of those gaps never came. The operational plan had assumed the containers would be accessible within minutes. The operational reality was that some containers were never recovered by the men who needed them. At Maleme on May 21st, General Kurt Student made the decision that saved the operation. New Zealand forces had partially withdrawn from Hill 107, the high ground commanding the airfield, in the confusion of the night fighting. Student's intelligence suggested the position might be falling. He ordered reinforcing transport aircraft to land directly on the airfield under fire, rather than wait for the drop zones to be cleared. The aircraft took casualties on the runway. The men who got off them secured the airfield. The containers at Malame, the MG-34s, and the Kar-98Ks and the mortar rounds became accessible to the paratroopers who had been fighting without them for 24 hours. The entire operational outcome of Crete turned on whether that airfield could be held long enough to land the weapons that should have been reachable on day one. The container problem at Crete is the rubber boat motor problem at Makin Island. In August 1942, Marine raiders paddled to the beach by hand because the outboard motors died in the surf. The motors were the extraction plan. Their failure changed the timing of everything that followed and left 7 raiders on an island they could not leave. The containers were the Fallschirmjägers' fighting capability. Their failure meant men fought the opening hours of a contested airborne assault with secondary weapons against primary defensive positions. Both operations failed at the insertion moment because of a single equipment failure the doctrine had not fully accounted for. Both achieved their stated objectives anyway. Both produced casualty rates that caused the institution to reconsider whether the mission type could be sustained at scale. The Fallschirmjäger, the gravity knife, was the item that existed entirely because of what happened when the container plan went wrong. It was not a combat weapon. The blade deployed via gravity. Hold the handle, press the release lever, invert the knife, and the blade dropped and locked open under its own weight. Single-handed operation was the entire design rationale. A Fallschirmjäger who landed tangled in parachute rigging, caught in an olive tree, pinned by his own lines in the seconds after landing, needed to cut free with whatever hand was available, while the other hand held something or held nothing at all. At Crete, men tangled in olive trees were shot before they could cut free. The knife existed because that specific scenario had been anticipated, planned for, and equipped against before the first man boarded the first aircraft. It tells you exactly what the institution expected the first 30 seconds after a jump to look like when the landing went wrong. Compare it to the Fairbairn Sykes knife carried by British paratroopers at Arnhem. The FS was a killing instrument, double-edged, balanced for thrusting, designed for silent close-range elimination. The gravity knife was a survival instrument designed for the 30 seconds before combat began, not for combat itself. 2 knives, 2 doctrines, 2 completely different institutional answers to what the first moment after landing required. The British answer was reach the enemy position unseen and kill silently. The German answer was get free of the parachute first, because nothing else was possible until that was done. The primary weapon tells you more about the SS than about the Fallschirmjäger. Luftwaffe Fallschirmjäger divisions that conducted the bulk of Operation Merkur received the FG-42, the Fallschirmjägergewehr 42. It was a purpose-built paratrooper weapon, designed in direct response to the Crete container failure. A full-power 7.92 by 57 mm rifle, capable of 750 to 900 rounds per minute, compact enough to carry on the body during the jump, and powerful enough to replace everything that had been in the containers. The Crete lesson had been heard, studied, and answered in metal and production capacity. The Waffen-SS Fallschirmjäger Battalion 500, established in 1943 to apply those lessons to special operations behind enemy lines, did not receive it. They carried the MP-40. The MP-40 weighed 4.03 kilograms unloaded. It used 9mm parabellum ammunition, had a 32-round magazine, fired approximately 500 rounds per minute, and had a folding stock. It was the same weapon SS Panzer commanders carried as their dismounted survival weapon after vehicle loss. For the SS Fallschirmjäger, it was the primary weapon, not because it was the right answer to what Crete had proven, but because the FG-42 was a Luftwaffe weapon produced by a Luftwaffe program and issued through Luftwaffe supply chains to Luftwaffe units. The SS had priority allocation of SS-issued equipment. The FG-42 was not SS-issued equipment, the institutional boundary that gave SS Panzer units. Tiger is ahead of Wehrmacht. Panzer divisions ran in both directions, and priority within the SS did not translate to access outside it. Battalion 500 used the MP-40 in the missions it was actually deployed for. In September 1943, SS Fallschirmjäger participated in Operation Oak, the Gran Sasso raid to rescue Mussolini from the Campo Imperatore Hotel on a 2,000-meter plateau in the Apennines. The insertion was by DFS-230 glider onto a 100-meter rock slope immediately below the hotel, a landing surface that had been assessed as impossible for conventional aircraft. 9 gliders landed in sequence on a surface that offered no margin for error. The Italian guards holding Mussolini stood down when they saw SS troops disembark. No shots were fired. Mussolini was in the air within minutes. The MP-40 was present and never used. Whether that outcome validated the weapon choice or simply described a different kind of mission is the question the institutional record does not answer. The notion sack, the bone sack, was the jump smock worn over the entire uniform and equipment for the descent. Splitter tarn muster, the splinter camouflage pattern, was designed to zip closed over everything, preventing equipment from snagging on the aircraft door or the rigging lines. After landing, it was unzipped, removed, or worn open. The engineering problem it solved is identical to the problem the valise solved for Marine raiders and the Denison smock solved for British paratroopers at Arnhem. How do you carry equipment through an insertion that will catch and kill you if anything snags? The raiders used a leg bag released on a cord when the rubber boats reached the beach. The British wore a smock designed to go over the harness. The Germans used a smock that enclosed everything for the duration of the descent. 3 different solutions to the same problem, arrived at independently, all operationally sound for the same reason. The form factor required for insertion was not the form factor required for combat. The Fallschirmjäger helm completed the jump kit. No brim, minimal rim. A chin cup rather than a chin strap absorbed landing impact rather than transferring it to the neck. British designers reached the same engineering conclusion with the Rimini helmet at Arnhem. Remove the brim that causes neck injuries on landing and replace the strap with a cup that distributes the force. 2 armies arrived at the same solution independently because the problem was identical, regardless of which side was jumping. The casualty figures from Crete's 3 primary drop zones document the container argument as a life-or-death calculation, rather than a doctrinal observation. At Malem, where students' reinforcement decision eventually secured containers' access, the operational situation stabilized by day 3, and the unit held its objectives. At Heraklion, where the drop landed on prepared British and Greek defensive positions and containers were largely inaccessible in the opening hours, the Fallschirmjäger regiment lost approximately 50% of its strength in the first 48 hours and never achieved its primary objective. The airfield remained in Allied hands until the general withdrawal. At Rethymno, the pattern repeated. Containers inaccessible, casualty rates among the highest of any drop zone on the island, primary objectives not taken. The variable that separated the outcomes was not the quality of the men, the quality of the P-38, or the quality of the gravity knife. It was whether the containers could be reached. The smock that enclosed all of it for the descent, including the uniform, the equipment, and the insignia on the collar that Allied forces had documented as changing tactical assumptions before a shot was fired, opened on the ground to reveal what the man inside had already agreed to. It was the same oath card that appeared in the Tiger crew kit and in the MG-42 gunner's pocket. The man who cut himself free of his parachute lines with a gravity knife, who fought the opening hours of Crete with a P-38 because his containers were behind the Allied line, who carried an MP-40 instead of the weapon Crete had proved paratroopers needed because the institutional hierarchy did not cross service lines, had signed a personal pledge to Adolf Hitler at induction. The same card, the same organization, declared criminal at Nuremberg in October 1946. The smock opened, the insignia was visible, and everything else followed from what it said. If you can name an airborne operation where the gap between the weapons a unit jumped with and the weapons it needed was wider than Crete, put it in the comments. Subscribe! This channel covers the hardware, the doctrine, and the decisions behind both.